Good morning. I now call to order the meeting of the members of the New York Job Development Authority doing business as Empire State Development for Tuesday, August 18th, 2015. The members have received the written materials in advance of this meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. As noted on the agenda posted to the internet, we welcome public comment on the items on the following agenda. To ensure maximum opportunity for participation, speakers representing themselves may speak up for 2 minutes each, and those representing groups may speak up to 4 minutes with one speaker per group. Speakers' comments may address only the items considered at today's meeting. Before we begin with the substantive portion of the meeting, I would like to ask the members whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to today's agenda items. If so, I would ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. And if not, we will go forward. And I will now ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the June 30th, 2015 members meeting.
Motion.
Second.
Great. We've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Great. So we have a number of agenda items this morning. They are related to, as you've probably heard, the governor has made some exciting announcements regarding the airports here in New York City. And one of them is directly related to that. One of them is also related to the other airports, JFK and LaGuardia. Jonathan will go through a number of agenda items related to a role that JDA will help create some LDCs and appoint councils to get those projects moving forward. So, Jonathan, if you could begin.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. New York State has been asked to facilitate the financing or refinancing of 2 major airport facilities. In both cases, revenue or payments from the facility or a private owner could be used to support a bond offering, the proceeds of which would be used to finance the applicable facility. Both facilities are serving a public purpose or otherwise are eligible to be funded with tax-exempt bonds. Federal tax law also imposes certain restrictions on the type of entities that can issue tax-exempt bonds. The New York Job Development Authority has the power, set forth in the Not-for-Profit Corporation Law and the Public Authorities Law, to create these local development corporations that comply with these federal restrictions and are also consistent with applicable state law. The authority is now being asked to form up to 2 of these local development corporations for the purpose of issuing tax-exempt bonds for these projects. The specific projects, as Mehul mentioned, are JFK Airport Terminal 1. Terminal 1 was initially financed with bonds in the approximate amount of $200 million issued by the New York City IDA. Terminal 1 is owned by Terminal 1 Group Association, or as people call it, TOGA, a consortium of 4 airlines which use the facility for their own passengers and lease out other portions of the facility to other airlines to service their passengers. TOGA has requested that the state refinance the existing bonds using the same revenue streams of airline rent and use fees to secure repayment. The other project, which is going to be far larger, is the LaGuardia Airport Central Terminal. The rebuilding of the Central Terminal is the centerpiece of the governor's vision to rebuild and reconfigure the entire airport. The developer, LaGuardia Gateway Partners, or Gateway, was chosen by the Port Authority of New York after an extended and thorough bid process. The Port Authority also requested an authority-created entity to serve as the issuer. Gateway also plans to use airline rent and use fees and other revenues to repay the bonds. Currently, we intend to create one LDC to issue bonds for both projects and other transportation and eligible projects. These LDCs would have the same structure as the Liberty Development Corporation, which was previously authorized by the authority. Accordingly, the LDC would have 2 members, the governor and this authority. Each member will elect 3 directors, and 1 director elected from each member must be present for a quorum. Members will also sign a voting agreement which provides that at any meeting to remove an authority-appointed director, the authority will vote as instructed by the governor. This structure ensures that only projects the governor supports will be permitted and also complies with the revenue ruling we obtained on the Liberty Development Corp., which finds that this structure is in compliance with federal tax law. Accordingly, the members are now requested to authorize the creation of up to 2 local development corporations, both of which would be empowered to issue tax-exempt bonds to finance or refinance eligible projects. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Questions from the directors?
Yeah, I just have a few just for clarification. With the JFK bonds, So they want to refinance them. When were the original bonds issued?
It was 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
What kind of term? Was it a 30-year bond or?
I believe it was a 30-year, but usually there's a 10-year no call, and so
Right.
that's why they're coming now to refinance in order to take advantage of the lower interest rates.
And the other thing is with the LaGuardia, so is it anticipated that they're going to use private activity bonds as far as we know?
Well, it will either be for private activity bonds, which are subject to a special exception for airports, or depending upon what the final structure could be, which is something we used at Atlantic Yards, it could be governmental bonds, but for other reasons would also, and then therefore they would be tax exempt for that reason.
Where's the Port Authority in this, and also, and what, if any, approvals needed to be done with the city?
Well, right now, the Port Authority's role, the city owns the airports, they lease the airports to the Port Authority, and the Port Authority has entered into lease agreements with the developers on both these airports. So the Port Authority has selected, particularly on Central Terminal, has selected the developer. In terms of city approvals, I'm not sure at this point for the bond aspect of the project whether we need any city approvals.
You just may want to check whatever that new lease agreement is, because the lease agreement is different than it was when you
right.
first did this.
Adam, I believe the answer to that question is the city's lease with the Port Authority. It extends out till it was 2050 at least.
Yeah, that's right.
If I recall correctly.
Yeah, but they may have put certain things in there saying that if
Right.
you do X, Y, and Z, you need to come back to us.
And the Port Authority, I know, is working with us closely to, make sure all those I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
So they're aware of the bond issuance, I think is what the question was.
Yeah,
Well,
they came to us, actually.
Yeah, because this was a public RFP process that's been ongoing.
But when these were done way back when, like you said, they got done through the IDA. Is there going to be any blowback from the city for now it going away from the city IDA to here in terms of wanting their share of the fees or wanting some say-so? I mean, have we heard anything from them on this?
We have not heard anything. I mean, the developer, again, I haven't looked at all the documents on the prior transaction, but the developer, I think, has the right to choose an issuer.
Well,
And Rob,
it's, in a muni deal like that, that's not always true, that they can just choose who they want by any means, so that's
Rob,
fine.
I'm Rob Godley, and we've met with the developer, and the developer has assured us that they've already discussed this with the city, and the city is aware.
Who's the developer?
The developer, Itoga. This is the one with the Kennedy development. So the city is aware that they're coming to us to refund their bonds. So the city is on board.
Could I just say something? Rather than, I know this may sound cynical, but rather than just having a developer assure you, I mean, it probably behooves you to take a look at the document just to be sure that you
Certainly,
have
certainly. I mean, we're just starting the process right now. We're under the whole document review. So yes, definitely.
And is this assumed to be like one stage, they're going to do this refinancing, and then is there going to be like a new money portion when they do actually do the development, or is it all going to be done in this refinancing?
There's actually two deals on the table right now.
Right.
There is the Kennedy deal,
And
which
the LaGuardia deal.
Yes.
But I'm saying, but for each of those deals, is whatever new money is needed going to be done in that refinancing, or is it
No,
going to be
no,
a separate deal?
Well, one is a refinancing only.
Okay.
That's the JFK. Central Terminal, there are no prior bonds, so
Okay.
that is the new money.
Okay, good.
And do you have any idea about the size for the central terminal now? No,
It's
not
approximately $2 billion. Yeah.
$2 billion.
That's for the whole project, start to finish?
No, that's
just for the bond
that's
issuance.
just
for
the
Central
bond
Terminal.
issuance. They're doing other financing, and now that the project has expanded in scale, we have not heard that that's going to change the size of the bond offering that we're going to do. So we're not necessarily funding the entire redevelopment at this point. If that happens, that'll have to be addressed then. But right now, the project is the same.
So it's likely that you probably wouldn't use private activity bonds, because that would be like an entire allocation of, an annual allocation of them, right?
Well, I believe that when the project qualifies for an exception to the normal private activity bonds, i.e. it's an airport financing,
So
then I don't think
there's
you're
no
subject to the
cap.
same
To the
same
cap.
cap.
Yeah, there's no
You're not
cap,
subject to the same
right.
cap.
Wasn't this like a Moynihan bill or something like that that authorized this? I'm trying to remember. Is this airport exception?
I think it's more recent than that,
Yeah?
honestly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of exceptions, waste disposal plants and
Mhm.
airports and things that, or types of projects that are considered so much in the public interest that notwithstanding that they may be privately owned,
And-
the developer is eligible for tax exempt financing.
And the other financings that are going on at LaGuardia, because there is a lot of construction there already, as I'm sure everybody knows, right?
Forever.
Yes, forever. It has no claim on the revenues from the central terminal, as far as you know? I mean, because obviously these bonds would want the first, lien.
We're in the very initial stages of looking at, the revenues here.
Mhm.
The revenues will be pledged to the bonds, but, we're still very much in the very first.
beginning.
Yes,
I see.
I mean, and this is really kind of the first step of, we just want to have an entity that's available, so when things get rolling, they're
I
not
see.
saying, well, I thought you were going to issue the bonds, you don't have an entity ready? It's like, oh, no, we've
I
taken
see.
care of that.
Okay.
And we're trying to, we don't ever want to be in the position of saying, oh, we're holding up the deal.
Yeah, of course.
Does this include the financing for the air train? Proposed?
No, this is strictly for the central terminal. I mean, we could speculate, but now that the project has grown due to the governor's intervention and trying to make it a much more global kind of solution to the problems at LaGuardia, that may change. We may be asked to issue bonds in a different context for different parts of the project, or it may consolidate into this. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts at this early stage.
So is there a total expected cost of the project, or we don't have that yet?
Well, I think I think I saw $4 billion.
Yeah.
$4 billion is projected. And obviously.
$8 billion then.
Thank you. That was a much more succinct way of saying
Right.
it.
And we'll be available to finance all of it. if we
Right,
want to.
exactly.
So, okay.
Okay.
Any other questions from any of the directors? Jen, Jim? Good? Mark? Okay. Excellent. Hearing no other questions, I will entertain a motion for approval.
Motion.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Terrific. I'll now ask Jonathan to present the next two items, both of which relate to request for authorization to enter into contract for co-bond counsel in connection with the refunding bonds related to the JFK Terminal 1 project. Unless someone objects, I'll ask the members to hold their votes until both items have been presented. Good. John?
Oh, well, actually, I'm going to request that we vote on the bond counsel for JFK project, and then approve counsel for the
That's
central
fine.
terminal.
That's fine.
Well, now that the board is a little bit more familiar with the two airport projects, we are requesting the appointment of bond counsel for these projects. Generally, the local development corporation, which we just requested your authorization to form, would appoint bond counsel. However, given the importance and timing of these projects, we're asking JDA to initially hire these counsels in order to expedite the transactions. Once the local development corporation is formed, the retainers will be deemed assigned to that new local development corporation. Neither JDA nor the to-be-formed local development corp will be liable for any legal fees. Both borrowers will be signing a pre-financing agreement in which they not only promise to pay our legal fees, but also deposit an amount sufficient with us to pay such fees, and subject to replenishment if those fees get depleted or if costs increase.
I'm sorry, the LDCs will?
Yes. Well, we're actually going to ask that the pre-financing agreement be put into place immediately, so that until the local development corporation is formed, any expenses between now and the period where the LDC is operating, where JDA is in effect retaining the counsel, JDA actually ESD will hold an impressed account with funds sufficient to pay any legal fees.
And how is the money, who's giving the seed money to the LDC?
In each case, it's the bond issuer or the borrower. So in other words, if they want us.
They're the issuer, so the borrower meaning the developer?
Yeah, well, actually, the local development corp will be the issuer,
Yeah.
and the borrower is borrowing the bond proceeds that we generate.
Obligor.
Yeah, borrower, obligor, yes, both are right.
Okay, no. So it's the private developer who
Yes,
is
it's the
on the
private
hook
developer.
in both cases for the expenses?
Mhm.
Exactly.
And our fees will be what?
The initial fees that we expect will be the council fees. Were you talking about our
No, our
financing
fees.
fee?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Rob was here, but it's a,
I'm sorry, I forget. I'm just thinking.
You're going to make
Yeah.
some money on this,
Yes,
aren't we?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
points?
I mean, that's common, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't recall. Sorry, we have to find out from Rob. He can confirm it.
You can get Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we've negotiated with both of the entities we're talking with, and so we can definitely share that.
Sure.
So we can walk it back.
The bond counsels for JFK are Winston and Strawn and the MWBE firm of the Hardwick Law Firm. Both firms are on JDA's pre-approved counsel list. Together, the firms will be initially capped at $350,000. Winston and Strawn was chosen in part because the firm was bond counsel on the original financing and was also requested by the borrower for this refinancing because it's much more efficient and quick to have counsel that are familiar with the original financing. Hardwick, the law firm of Hardwick, was selected pursuant to a mini RFP process where we interviewed several MWBEs and made specific reference to this transaction, and we found that this firm was especially qualified in the specialty of airport financing. So at this point,
But is this efficient? In other words, I understand you want to include this firm, but do they have to do the same work? Can't they do other work like disclosure or something else in order to meet whatever your requirements are? It sounds like you're using two firms for what can be done with one.
well, I mean, the division of labor between the two firms is something that we aggressively pursue with all the firms because
It just sounds inefficient to me.
Well, there's always the argument that one firm could do a lot of this work more efficiently than two firms, but we are complying with the governor's directive to always have an MWBE that can handle a minimum of 30% of the work. How that's divided, in one of the situations, the division may end up being disclosure counsel.
Okay.
So
I'm just saying that sounds to me
Yeah,
having
no,
a
it's an
separate
excellent-
role where they're doing something that needs to be done versus duplication of services, and then end up where if there is an issue and they don't agree on something, you can't get an opinion from one firm, then all of a sudden you got a big problem. So, I just think it's good to try to do all this, but I wouldn't do it in a way that is going to cause problems or be inefficient at the end of the day.
Yeah, because it is unusual to have co-bond counsels. I
well,
mean,
we've actually been doing that on every bond transaction for the last several years.
but on revenue bond transactions to have co-bond counsels is, I think is difficult, and I think it is, inefficient. It's better to split the work somehow, as, Adam suggested.
Correct, and we've talked to counsel about that, and sometimes the counsel raises the fact that even if you bifurcate their responsibilities, ultimately the bond counsel who's issuing the opinion for tax purposes has to be familiar with the entire transaction.
Sure.
So you can never segregate it so much where bond counsel just simply relies. on
Right,
what
but are you
co-counsel
looking for,
do.
again, just to be clear, so you're looking for, just be clear as to whose opinion you're looking for and for what issues. If you're looking for one tax opinion, you should try to stick with that. If you're going to look for two tax opinions, then you're asking for trouble.
No, I'm sorry, I just walked back in, but, even right now, we're pricing a bond today for the Jacob Javits Center. And on that transaction, we had co-bond counsels. And before the transaction, is even put in motion, the counsel's responsibilities are clearly defined. There's no two tax opinions. There's only one tax
Correct.
opinion, and that's given to one of the co-bond councils. But in the Jacob Javits, we have two co-councils, and they each have clearly defined responsibilities that don't overlap each other.
Okay. I think that's what
Sure.
we were suggesting,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. Well, those are the two council that we're proposing to retain for JFK, and at this point, we could.
Yeah, are there any other questions regarding that, councils for JFK, the JFK transaction? If not, I'll
Just
yeah,
a quick question. It looks like items 3 and 4 on the agenda are identical. Is that just because it's the two law firms?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
That's right. And we'll vote for both items now together, so I'll entertain a motion for approval for both items.
Is that work? I thought you said you needed it voted on separately.
Well, we're first voting on the council for JFK.
Oh, I
So
see,
these are-
I
these
see.
are the
I'm
two-
sorry.
the two
Nope, that's
co-bond
okay.
councils for
Misunderstood.
JFK,
Okay.
And then we're going to vote, and there's actually
Got
four
it,
council
got it.
for Central Terminal.
Motion.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Any opposed? Hearing none, thank you very much. Jonathan, please go ahead and present the next 4 items, all of which relate to the request for authorization to enter into contracts for council in connection with the issuing of bonds to fund a new central terminal at LaGuardia Airport. Again, unless someone objects, I'll ask the members to hold their votes until all 4 items have been presented by Jonathan.
So, on the Central Terminal at LaGuardia, the bond council that we found most qualified after interviewing 4 other firms is Squire Patton Boggs to be the majority firm. We found that although they were not on our pre-qualified list, their extraordinary depth and their facility for the specialty of airport financing made them our overwhelmingly unanimous choice. In addition, we're proposing to hire Doug Seaton.
I'm sorry, but I thought that the whole reason to have a pre-qualified list is that the idea was that you have to choose from them. So
How do they get to jump through the process?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well-
isn't a lot of the other firms going to cry foul and say,
Well, we did.
well, why are we getting passed over for somebody that didn't go through what we went through and didn't get approved?
Well,
And
okay, no, it's a good question. What happened was we were engaging in a mini RFP process, which, although not required by statute, is considered a good process, that even the firms that are on our pre-qualified list, we don't just say, we like this one, we like that
Sure.
one. We have a much more informal process, the initial retention. So we initiated that process with several firms, and as we did that process, we got calls. Actually, we got suggestions also from the second floor. Have you looked at this firm? Have you tried this firm? Have you looked at this firm? We said, you know what? Let's open it up. We really want the best representation we can get on this project. So we added 2 firms that were not on our pre-qualified list. However, that's, I wouldn't call it a technicality because we're complying with the procurement law, but these other 2 firms, were in a different configuration on our list. For example, Squire Patton Boggs, Squire Sanders was on our list. Then the people from Squire Sanders merged with Patton Boggs. Now, technically, with a new firm that's combined that way, they're not on a pre-qualified list. But we have worked with the financing people from Squire Sanders.
they will be
Squire
on
Sanders,
this deal?
And they will be on this
Who
deal.
particularly will be on the deal?
Chris Weitzel, Tom Cole.
From
and all-
Squire or from
those
the
are
other
from
one?
those are from Squire, and then people from the other firm is Rodney Slater, who used to be the Secretary of Transportation, and they also have a woman. I can't remember her name, but she is a specialist in FAA matters and works out of their DC office because there are sort of other airport approvals that we need.
I just
So when you say when you say how do they jump, one of the main reasons that we got to them was because we were interviewing the sort of the pre-merged firm was someone we had dealt with, and there's another firm that also wasn't on our list. But again, the people that we worked with actually the person we worked with was the individual attorney who came up with the idea of using a local development corp to issue, and he's moved through two firms. What?
Who?
Jonathan Ballin, used to be at Mintz
Okay.
Levin.
Yep.
Then he moved to McKenna Long, where he's been helping us with our disposition of prisons. And now that firm merged, again, with Denton's, which is the largest firm in the world right now, although, frankly, I'd never heard of it. But in terms of number of lawyers, they're the largest.
Yeah, usually those big firms don't last that long, so I wouldn't say that's a.
Well, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's a.
I also think it's fair to say that, when the slate was sent out for the attorneys, that we didn't know at that time that we will be doing airport financing. So this is something new in our sort of, business practice here.
And Rob, let me clarify. When we initially sent out our list of pre-qualified, law firms,
Yeah.
airport financing was not something that we assumed that we'd be doing.
Absolutely.
This is something in the last year.
Yeah.
I'd say that we've been.
Can it be, given that, because I think that's a really, good explanation about why you had to do that. I'm just concerned because we voted for this pre-qualified list and to approve them, and they were the ones everybody was going to be chosen by. I don't remember what the resolution, read like, but I hate to think we voted for something and now we're contradicting what we already passed. So is it possible in the resolution or the minutes or something to reflect that, in fact, you did a new RFP, which is what you're saying you did, due to the different nature, of this potential financing? I think that would be, I would feel a lot more comfortable because this way it wouldn't look like.
Okay. Well,
Or is it
yeah.
clearly documented
I think
in the resolution or in the minutes that some of these firms are the successor firms of firms that were on the pre-qualified list?
No, that.
Right. I
I
think
think it's
and
important
I
to
can
say
put
that.
in, yeah.
I think it's very important.
Yeah.
that could
Because
certainly be
everybody
added.
recognizes that happens, but then it doesn't look like it's just, there was somebody who had absolutely no connection with this entity and, bypassed everybody.
Except, I don't know if they're the successor firms. Did the other firms close down?
Well,
It merged in or whatever.
Well-
Squire Patton was a merger,
Okay.
Still got the Squire
and
name,
the,
right? It was Squire.
and
Sanders.
Denton's actually was a merger with McKenna, but McKenna was not on our list either. That was where just the group of attorneys that we used
See,
moved
that's
from
different
Minnesota.
than.
But I can explain.
Can you
both in the
explain
mater-
both
yes,
of them?
would-
I mean,
absolutely.
I would feel comfortable if you explained why you went outside of the pre-qualified list. I think that's very
You
important.
can amend the
Absolutely.
materials.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will amend the materials.
I could also attest that, at least when it comes to bond deals, and working with our in-house counsel, that, we go down the list and we make sure that we fairly rotate the business among the qualified list. So when we're out in the market or, doing another bond deal, we look at who served recently on a bond transaction, and then we make sure that we utilize.
Yeah, I have no doubt you do that. It's just that the only reason this becomes a question is because they're outside
Yep,
of that
yep.
list, which we
Understood.
approved, previously.
No, it's a legitimate request, and just being technical for a moment, the pre-qualified list is generally where we go, but when we don't have expertise of people on the list, or for whatever reason, we still have the right or the authority to go through a single source process,
Yeah,
so long as we
I-
can justify it. And I think what you've asked is that we justify it.
Yes.
And I will do a better job at that.
Thank you. And if you could just add that into this resolution. We can approve it just with you saying you're going to add it in,
Right.
whatever. That would be great.
Thank you.
Jonathan, you're still.
Yes. So, so the minority firm of Doug Seaton and Associates was on our list. We did the mini RFP process, and
Why do you call it a mini RFP?
well, the original retention to create the list, which JDA
Mhm.
approved, I guess it was a year or two ago, we did an RFP to the world. We did a contract reporter insertion. We went through all the required steps in the
Right.
procurement law. That was the RFP. Now, because many agencies have done this to accelerate the time frame within which they can hire counsel without going through that whole process. What happens is a lot of the authorities have established lists, and they'll say, like, for bond counsel, we have 10 attorneys who are on a qualified list. Well, what's preventing the authority to say, gosh, we really like the folks at Winston and Strawn. Let's hire them for this deal. You just pick them. That's permitted and in conformity with the statute. Well, now we have another project and another project. Let's just keep picking Winston. We like them. They do good work for us. So in order to prevent not only the appearance of being, unfairly benefiting one firm at the expense of the others, it's considered good practice to conduct what is a mini RFP, which means we don't have to go through the contract reporter process, but we have an interview or a phone call with multiple firms and say, here's the project. Tell us your experience and qualifications and what you'll bring to the table.
Okay,
we call that a mini process.
Is it a mini or is it a specialized? I mean, because it's a specialized type of financing?
We try to do it as often as we can in
But
any
You're
finance.
still randomly selecting names from the list, though, so.
Well,
It's
no,
not
we don't.
Not random
No,
at
it's
all,
not
though.
random.
It's actually, yeah. It's very methodical, though. You go through all those firms on the list, though, and you actually question them, ask them about their experience, their level of expertise. And based on that, though, it's usually about 3 attorneys in the room. We come together and try to score them as to what we think
And the selection
their fit is. Yeah.
And the selection of those firms is often based on other factors of, well, we found this firm was strong in a particular area, or we didn't think, we think their depth is not as much. We might pick them for a simple transaction, for something that's as high profile and complex as Central Terminal, potentially one of the more complex projects of the decade. We wanted to make sure that we were leaving no stone unturned in getting the best possible representation for the state.
And it's also a way to get the best price, too.
So, in addition to these 2 co-bond counsels, we've also made a decision to hire disclosure counsel. And this is as a result of recent changes to federal securities laws, in particular the Dodd-Frank Act. There are an increasing number of rules and an increasing amount of oversight with respect to disclosure and continuing disclosure for issuers of tax-exempt bonds. In order to fully address these requirements, many issuers are retaining separate disclosure counsel in addition to bond counsel. This additional expertise will help ensure compliance with applicable securities laws and market practices. So as part of this mini RFP process, we also looked with this concept of providing not just a focus on disclosure, but really a second set of eyes, because as much as, bond issuance seems like sort of a black box of you just, okay, we'll get the experts, they'll do the bonds. There's a lot of differing opinions and different interpretations. How far do we push language in the statute or in regulations? Is this permitted, is this not? Opinions differ, and ultimately, if you go to one firm, you're a little bit limited in the sense that if there's a dominant person in that firm who says go this way, you don't necessarily always hear the second voice. Having disclosure counsel gives us a little bit more give and take, and gives us, I think, a better platform to assess. So with that in mind, we selected the firm of Dentons, which again is not on our pre-qualified list, but because of their unusual expertise with our LDC structure, as well as extensive depth in bond disclosure issues, we chose them.
As disclosure.
As the majority disclosure counsel, yes. And for the minority, we chose the firm of Joe Reed through the mini RFP process. He is on our pre-approved list.
Is that a one-person firm?
No, I mean it's his name is eponymous with the firm.
It says Law Offices of Joseph C. Reed.
Right, but he has other attorneys working with him. He's not the only attorney at the firm. And he's represented us multiple times, and he's represented most of the other authorities. In fact, he is the one MWB counsel when we ask majority firms, like, have you worked with MWBE counsel that you're comfortable with, knowledgeable, capable? His name has actually been raised the most often as a very capable and competent attorney.
And we're currently working with him also as co-bond counsel in the Jacob Javits transaction that's going to close next week.
How many people are in this firm?
I believe he has 4 attorneys, including himself. Pretty much as 3 of them work on the transaction.
Now, I'm going to ask another odd question. Clearly, if this was on the dime of the LDC or the state, I would think the cap on legal fees would be a good thing and appropriate. But since it's not being paid by the state, right? Why are we capping the fees if, in fact, complications and issues arise that require the deal to get done sooner, or things that weren't foreseen? Does this hurt the project? Because yes, I care if the state's money is going to be paid. I want to minimize it and cap it. But if I'm not on the hook for it, what do I care what they pay to get this thing done 6 months faster, or whatever
Right.
happens to happen, or whatever complications? So why do we feel it's our job now to do this?
Okay, we actually thought about that issue and actually discussed it internally several times. And we agree that there is a point of view, or
Because this is really like a private sector project. This is not a typical geo bond issue with the same old, same old. This has, you can see it already, there's already inherent complexities within the deal that people have not even
Thought about.
begin to think about.
Ah,
And then, the quality of the work, quality of the project then suffers. So I'm just saying, if it's not a cost to the state, why do we care?
okay.
And let them deal with the developer on that. The developers are very good on their own of keeping fees
Monitoring.
down, but they're also good at making a decision saying, I'll spend more money if it means either getting the project done or getting it done quicker.
I believe the answer is reputational risk. Our names are on these bonds are being issued, and it's our reputation that we're going to be issuing the bonds the best way we could do it and executing them. So by doing that, we want to make sure that, we get the right people working on the transaction, and we also want to make sure that they're fairly compensated for their work. So
No, but
But I think you're.
He's saying the opposite.
I think you're going to run into a problem here.
we're
And unless you have the means or flexibility to say that should, so you say to cap the fees, assuming this is plain vanilla and everything's going fine, should complications arise, there is a mechanism for the developer to make a decision on his own to go beyond that, because what's going to happen here if what I'm saying does happen, and there is unforeseen circumstances that arise, and the project comes to a screeching halt because people put their pencils down and say, we're not going to work.
We can always come back-
And you just-
we can always come back to the board, though, to raise the
And
cap.
that- and
That's
yeah,
not
yeah.
something.
I just think that.
absolutely.
that-
Yeah.
that's
But
just-
just let me make one point. Just let me make one point is that part of this is that this still is a public project to some extent, and as a public project, yes, the developer can spend as much money as he wants and has done so. And we've done these types of projects before, and you're very familiar with our Liberty Bond projects, where Silverstein in many cases said, gee, I want to consider this financing alternative. He would have the bond counsel running around for a month and say, no, I'm not interested in that, I'm going to try something else.
Sure.
And we fully expect that will happen. But it was a conscious determination that we wanted to sort of set the tone that money still comes out of the project, and it's more of a public project.
Well, it doesn't come out of the project because you're not going to finance it with bonds, right?
Well, generally, the
There's
council
a
fees
cap.
are.
No, but there's a cap, from the tax regs on how much, I think even under airports, there's a cap about how much of the proceeds can be used for issuance costs. So the rest of that would have to come out of the developer's, contribution.
Going back to what Jonathan said, with Silverstein, he paid all the cost out of his own pocket. It
Right.
didn't come out of the bond proceeds. So there is that
Yeah.
alternative that, if there should be any difficulty, meeting the expenses, the developer would have to pick them
Yeah,
up.
we picked
So is
it-
that just a
we-
silent agreement? I mean, it's, because this says it's capped. I mean, what?
Well, it's capped, but that doesn't mean the cap can't be raised. We just wanted to sort of set the tone, and also, we were also concerned, particularly with coming to the JDA board, that at this point, this is really not going to be a JDA project. It's really going to be, I mean, as much as JDA is the only state entity that can form these local development corporations, this is not a subsidiary of JDA, and it's actually supposed to be kept separate and apart. We actually were, part of the concern was we didn't want to come to JDA and say, okay, you're going to hire these counsel unlimited, and we thought that that might be something awkward, that we're asking you folks as the directors to basically give them open ticket on expenditures. So we put the cap in. This agreement will be, the agreement will be assigned to the local development corporation when it's funded, and they will have the ability to easily increase the cap or create an open ticket, depending upon how the transaction is going. So
But then,
nothing.
They can't do that.
that creates another problem. See, here's my problem with it. We're setting the things that you're worried about. It seems that we're setting ourselves up for, because if in fact that does happen, then all of a sudden there becomes this issue. Well, there was a cap and they've blown through it. Versus there was an anticipation that this thing could either go here or go in this range, and there was some other mechanism where that we thought about all the possibilities in the outset. But if you do it here, like this, now you're setting yourself up that if something does happen and they do have to do all those things, well, somebody's going to come in and say, well, did that LDC really have the ability to override this resolution? And then when you do that, that becomes a public thing, and now you've created a story that probably didn't need to exist if we all said, we understand that the complexities of this project may be more than we envision, therefore there will be a mechanism by which, however it is, you have to approve it, their developers got to approve it, there's a mechanism, or the Howard's got to approve it, there is a mechanism to do this.
And it can't come out of bond proceeds, or it has to follow, the
I
TEFRA law.
I just know that this is not your typical, especially with LaGuardia. I'm not just worried about JFK.
But let me make a
LaGuardia,
suggestion.
I'm telling you that this is not, there's no way you're going to end up paying that much money for that deal.
It's going to
Well,
be
let me make a
okay.
suggestion. There's no legal reason why we have to put a cap on. We just did that because your opinions are all valid. We came to a different conclusion, but neither is absolutely wrong or absolutely correct. If the board directs us to put no cap on it, I think legally we have no problem with that.
Right. I think
But
just so.
do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The reason why I'm saying that, I'm not in favor of bigger fees, but you're creating this bar or this public you're talking about the reputational issues. You're creating a public expectation that this work should be done for this amount of money. On the face of it, I say no way. So what you're now doing is you've created a budget that we know will be blown. That's the story. Why did you blow through the budget? Not that we understand that this project is not your normal plain vanilla project. It has inherent complexities, and it may go beyond. And it's up to you guys, the executive management and the developers, to control your costs. But you also have to have the ability to know when you need to spend it. And I just think handcuffing ourselves like this is creating the story you want to avoid, and that's my only point.
No, I totally understand where you're coming from on this, though. I think optically what we see ourselves conferring a public benefit, right? So the issue became accountability. Without having this max here, it looks as if we're saying you could spend as much as you want. And although this is coming from the developer, the fear is that optically it still looks as if we're saying that lawyers' fees can go as high as they want, though. That we're not.
Look at Emily's point about, she's saying that there's a tax exempt threshold on what issuance fees it can be. So you can also put that into your cap, saying so long as we're within the allowable issuance fee threshold that is permitted by tax law.
Or set an amount to say anything above this amount will be, is permissible if it is paid directly by the developer and does not come out of
Or
bond
approved by
proceeds.
so-and-so.
Something, because I agree with Adam. I think these numbers are really unrealistic given the task that they're going to have, especially with LaGuardia.
Sure. No, we could definitely do that, though. I think the thought was always that if we exceeded
I will
this
bet
max,
any
we'd
amount of
come
money,
back.
there's no
But
way.
that-
I will
that-
bet any
I
amount of money,
agree.
there's no way. Because,
Okay.
especially when you look at the amounts you set forth between JFK and LaGuardia,
One is a
one is
refinancing.
50,000 different than the other. One is a layup, the other one is
Yeah.
going to be jumping through hoops.
No, you're absolutely right. We just thought this would allow for accountability, so as soon as we hit that cap, we would come back to the board again
Yeah,
on
but
this.
that, see,
But
that
I-
makes it worse,
Yeah.
because
Because
then
then you're
it's
blowing
like,
budgets.
yeah.
Now you're blowing budgets and you're not managing. See, the idea is to understand and have a reasonable expectation from the outset, so it's not about
Right.
why did you blow the budget.
So if I can make a suggestion, I think, it would be great if you guys would spend a little time looking at the TEFRA law related to the airports, which has an exemption, right? And look and see, it's right in the IRS, I can't remember what section it is now, but it's right in that section, and it tells you exactly what, how much you're allowed. I think it's,
Yeah, it's on
I
the
think
total
it's-
cost of issuance, but I'm not sure.
no, what it is, it's on the total total amount of the bonds, a certain percentage can be used for issuance costs. That's how it is calculated. And so I would, take a look at that and formulate it around that, or is there a number that management wouldn't feel comfortable with? If it's over, say anything above this amount will be paid separately by the developer, period. And this way, it's upfront, everybody knows that it's on the developer to, come up with the money.
Sure. So Emily and Adam, just because the discussion is here,
Mhm.
is there a proposal to amend the resolution so we can still
Yes,
vote on it
Yes.
today?
yes.
That you'd be comfortable with, and maybe again, whatever you guys might propose. And
Yeah,
staff agrees
I
with,
think something, like we just said, anything either above,
Allowable within the tax law.
right, allowable within TEFRA, given the limitations within the tax law related to airport financing,
Okay.
The other thing, that would be okay with me. The other thing is like this law firm with 4 attorneys, they're doing Javits, it seems like they're doing a lot. They're taking on a lot.
Only
just
Javits at this
for-
point in time is my understanding. Is that right?
No,
Yeah.
but you're saying other authorities use them too?
Have used them in the past. I'm not saying he doesn't have. I don't know how many.
I mean, I'm not doubting his expertise. It's just that, using such a small firm, if you actually expect them to do any work and keep giving them all this work, it's like, that's a lot.
Well, at this point, Javits will be finished in 2 weeks, so we're not concerned about an overlap there because this work is not really going to generate until probably October or November of this. And on Central Terminal, it's not even clear that we will really figure out the structure where we could actually start planning the bonds until January. So Joe Reed will, in terms of us, he will clearly have time.
Yeah, and we've spoken with him, and Mr. Reed has assured us that he has both the ability and the
Because
capability of
there are a
handling
lot
such
of other
transaction.
minority or women-owned firms that, can do this type of work.
But we have 4 approved firms. We're actually using all of them right now. So if we had chosen one of the other firms, they would have actually had conflicting work just for us. So this was actually, we almost didn't have a choice in terms of going to Joe Reed. But it turns out that he was actually, and this is Disclosure Council, which is a little,
I'm well aware of what Disclosure Council does. Okay. All right.
okay, so we'll certainly make these changes.
Great.
So, I guess I'd like to see some language added to the proposed resolution that the board will be notified at the next succeeding meeting if and when the amount exceeds what was previously designated as the cap amount.
Sure.
Yeah, I
That's
think
fine.
that's a
That's
great
great.
idea.
For the
Yeah.
purpose of accountability,
Absolutely, absolutely.
that carries.
No question about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I do.
Great. Jen and Tony, do you guys have any questions or are okay with the kind of direction we're taking this? I think I just lost Jen. I think on me, but sorry, Tony. Go ahead. Take your time.
I don't. Can you hear you?
Yes, but the questions that Jen had to just step out for a minute, but we've been listening to the conversation and agree with the points being raised by Adam and Emily in terms of the concerns.
Great.
So
And I got to ask.
we're on board with the conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. And the question, I just want to make sure that we're clear on the resolution we're voting for. I don't want, to make sure all the directors are comfortable, members are comfortable with the suggested changes before we vote. So that's, again, any other comments on that? They want to make sure we're adding the provision you just mentioned. If that's all good, then I'll entertain a motion for approval of all 4 items.
Motion?
Second?
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Do you want that language, what wall, for the JFK?
I believe it's just for the LaGuardia item. Yeah, that's a good question. Great. Any opposed? Hearing none. Then being no further business, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
Second.
Great. Thank you all. Tony, thank you very much, and Jen, please thank Jen for us as well.
Yeah.
got a minute?
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.